What are assets and liabilities? Let's begin with a very simple example. Suppose Amy has 3 apples and Barry has 4 bananas and they agree to trade with each other. But what if Barry forgot his bananas? In that case, Barry could promise to deliver the bananas at a future point in time. He could write this promise on a piece of paper and give it to Amy. This promise is a liability for Barry and an asset for Amy. Suppose Amy wants to buy cherries and finds Cheryl, who is selling them. But Cheryl is not interested in Amy's apples. In that case, Amy could pay Cheryl with the piece of paper. If Cheryl wants bananas, she could find Barry, hand over the paper, and Barry would give her bananas in return. Barry's liability is then gone. If Cheryl doesn't want bananas, she could use the paper to pay yet someone else. Any liability is also an asset to someone else. But not all assets are liabilities. For instance, if you buy a house, it is simply an asset that you own. For any person, we can add up their assets and subtract their liabilities. This gives you their net worth. Typically, when 2 people do business, one hands over a good or service and the other hands over something we call money. What is money? Like Barry's promise to deliver bananas, money is a liability. Specifically, it is a liability of the government. Why is money a liability of the government? The government spends resources. For instance, it employs civil servants and military personnel. But when it pays wages, it doesn't give people goods or services. Instead, it pays with money. The government issues this money, which is something no one else is allowed to do. So people receive money, but why do they value it? After all, the government doesn't produce anything like Amy produces apples or Barry produces bananas. Instead, the key benefit of money is that people need it to pay their taxes. The government does not accept any other form of payment. As the government receives money through taxes, its total liabilities decrease. There are all kinds of assets and liabilities. A key characteristic is, what does the liability promise? Is it 1 barrel of oil, 2 ounces of gold, $100, 1,000 euros, or perhaps some other financial asset? Another characteristic is, under what circumstances will something be delivered? For example, car insurance only pays if you have an accident. An important characteristic is when delivery will take place. It could be tomorrow, in a week, in a year, or more. There is a difference between goods or money received today or in the future. In general, but not always, the further in the future the payment, the less it is worth today. Put differently, people are impatient and therefore require compensation for waiting. For example, on January 4th, 2010, you could buy $1 to be received 1 year later for 99 cents. $1 received 2 years later cost 98 cents. 5 years later, 88 cents. 10 years later, 69 cents. And 30 years later, 26 cents. The price of future payments affects the prices of goods that provide benefits for an extended period of time. For instance, the price of a house depends on all the future benefits it will provide. The value of future benefits depends on the price people put on future payments today. For apartments and houses, the value of today's benefits are easy to observe, namely rental prices. Assets and liabilities allow people to save, for instance for retirement. In your working years, you don't spend everything you earn and save up assets. When you are old, you can use these assets to pay for things. As with any good or service, prices of assets and liabilities are determined in markets. A key driver is the demand and supply today versus in the future. For example, if the number of retired people will be higher in the future and the number of people working lower, then there will be a lower supply in the future, which will drive up the price of goods in the future. Another example. Suppose there has just been a technological breakthrough, a new machine that will be able to produce goods very efficiently. People know that supply will be higher in the future, which will make goods relatively cheap in the future, and therefore relatively expensive today. The simplest way of thinking about assets and liabilities is that they provide a record-keeping system. We can keep track of who owns what and who owes what to whom. I hope you enjoyed this video.